Anthony, tell me if you will, the two main Shia families in Iraq, the Hakims and the Sadrs, both went different ways after the election. How are they faring in early results as far as we can tell?
Well, I think it's a great question to focus on those two groups. They were pillars of Shiite politics since 2003 when the Americans invaded. They were the two pillars of the election alliance that came together, the predominantly Shiite coalition that competed in Sunday's vote. I think what we've seen with the results is perhaps the initial reflection of the different nature of these two movements. The Sadr movement has long seen itself as a popular movement with a street backing. They take pride in being able to relate to the concerns of the constituency. The Hakim movement, the Supreme Council, has been much more of a clandestine organization. It's like it's preferred to work within the government, within the security apparatus. It doesn't have that popular backing, that popular support that the Sadrs can boast. And I think we've seen the reflection of that in the election so far.
And Friday prayers we've just seen and heard here. What messages, what political messages, if any, was the crowd hearing?
As usual, the Friday prayers was mainly a homily about worship, about good behavior, about being faithful and devout. But there was a message from Muqtada Sadr himself, who's in Iran right now in exile, supposedly studying to become an Ayatollah. His message was a message of thanks to his supporters, to his constituency here, for turning out to vote and for apparently putting in the numbers that are going to allow the Sadr movement to do very well in the elections.
And is that a surprise?
It is a surprise in the sense that a lot of people were predicting they wouldn't fare as well this time around. There was talk of their campaign being disorganized, of perhaps the movement waning after the military defeat they suffered in 2008. But I think what we've seen with, again, very initial results is the Sadr movement being able to rely on that core constituency that it's had since 2003. It can turn out the numbers when it needs to turn them out, and it looks to have done that in Sunday's vote.
Is it too early to rule out Sadr then as a political force in Iraq?
I think you almost have to assume that they will be a political force in Iraq. They're the one movement that is an organic movement in some ways. It is of a constituency that has seemed to be pretty stable over the past 7 years. And I think what we may see in the negotiations over a new government is the Sadrs acting as a wild card, that whoever wants to be prime minister will have to get, perhaps their acceptance. But we also may even see the Sadrs coming up with some kind of compromise candidate themselves.
And the Hakims, the Supreme Council.
I think we're seeing the waning of that movement in some ways. I think they'll remain a force because of their organization, because of their money. They have close ties to Iran. But I think we've seen perhaps the waning of what they once exercised as dominant influence in Shiite politics. I think those days may be over.
And is it as simple as the fact that they threw in their hands with the American created governing council at the beginning and Sadr stayed aloof? Is it a credibility issue?
I think they're tarred probably as much by that as they are by their ties to Iran. I think a lot of Iraqis still have a certain nationalist sentiment. They don't like this closeness between the Supreme Council and Iran. And I think it's also a failure of the Supreme Council itself. It has failed to create that popular network, that popular backing, the institutions in the street that it can rally and mobilize its supporters when it needs to.
And yet we believe Sadr is in Iran. Nothing simple here, is it?
It's never simple. And you wonder when he's going to return, if he's going to return, and what his absence is going to mean for politics here.